Hello, everybody. Neil Hiscox again, publisher of Canadian Auto Dealer Magazine. I'm speaking today with Brent Wees, who is a longtime industry participant and expert in a wide range of areas with a lot of focus, I think, recently on events, training, and really different ways, different tools, platforms, and technologies for building skills in the industry. And I'm really eager to talk to Brent as we consider the impacts of the pandemic, and we particularly consider the longer term impacts of the pandemic. People are adjusting to working remotely. They're adjusting to the tools that are used for working and learning remotely. And I think there's the potential that there's going to be some real permanent change in how we come out of this, and there's going to be a new normal at the other end. Brent, I'd love to hear your thoughts on both what you see happening right now and your sense of what that new normal might look like.
Well, thanks. First off, Neil, thanks, and thanks to Canadian Auto Dealer for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be able to share sort of what's on my what's on my mind and how I'm looking at things like this. And I think part of my my initial struggles with everything that's happened in the last little while is I'm not a crisis manager by any stretch, and I think that there's been a rush to our channels for content in order to help us build and sort of survive and way through this. And it's an interesting time because there's, to your point in your question, there's still so much that's unknown about what's ahead. We just found out in our province, right? They've extended their state of emergency for another 28 days, till June. That's going to impact a lot of employment and unemployment, and especially with the dealers that read and follow the magazine and need to stay engaged while they weather their service capabilities, their need to sell online. I think with the capacity to learn and how to evolve that, of course, online training and online learning is going to explode. There's any number of webinars you can join every day right now to learn more about how certain vendors and certain companies feel you should move through this. And some of it is very mindful, and some of it, in my opinion, isn't, because I don't know who to sell to if everyone is sort of in a hold pattern. What I do feel, though, is while the consumer may be in a hold pattern, there's time for dealers and their teams to leverage this online, this time online, in this time where remotely we are making efforts to connect with one another and connect with our teams and figure out what our strategies are going to be moving ahead. Because I do feel and I believe that the dealers that have laid off their staff want those staff back. And so if there's things right now, I think smarter dealers will start to not just look at how quickly they can get their digital retailing, for instance, set up online, but how quickly can they get their teams organized in a way that they can keep discussing their strategy, keep figuring out what they need to do as a group. So I think the content is so hyper focused on everything COVID right now, which is, there's nothing else to friggin' focus on, right? They're just not. However, at some point, the doors are going to be open again. At some point, there's going to be customers and things to do again, online and offline. So for me, I'm hyper curious right now to see how many dealers and how many dealer teams are trying to figure out ways of working with their staff online to just build simple strategy sessions, not just to meet to check in to see how everyone is, but to sit down and go, hey, like 30 days from now or 60 days from now, we may be opening our doors again, and of course we will. Like I'm optimistic, and I think everything will get back to normal when it's supposed to. But I do think the dealers that are trying to leverage online, like Zoom meetings or Google Hangouts, or even leveraging training portals to go to watch things as a group, disseminate it together, and go, what can we pull out of this in order to build long-term strategies? Because I think a lot of what's happened in the last, since the start of March, has been very quick. Things have happened fast, and things have been very knee-jerk. Everything from what to turn on, who to lay off, and then what to cancel in terms of software and services. So right now, I guess for me, the best way to really wrap all of that up is, what are you doing with your teams while you can to properly plan? So it's a perfect time for that right now. It's a perfect time to figure out, just a quick online strategy to meet once a week, or once every other week, to figure out things to plan for when the doors do open. Because I think we all know there's also going to be a real bottleneck, right, of consumers. Like, all of us, we can't wait to get out of the house. I got my Barry Melrose hair happening here. I can't wait to go just get a friggin' haircut. So imagine what the consumer body is going to be like when the doors are open and we can just go outside, get into stores, get into businesses. People aren't going to want to shop online in those moments. They're going to want to actually interact with human beings again. So I think, to the point about just taking that time as a group and going, how can you engage your staff who are at home, laid off, ready to come back to work? And there's a lot of laid off staff that are quite eager, I think, to help their dealerships plan and prepare. So, I think it's just get a temperature from your group, from your staff, and say, who wants to meet regularly? Maybe start to think ahead instead of just thinking in the now, so we can take our minds off a little bit about what's happening today, and do some solid planning. So I think that the e-learning portals and the online trainings right now should be heavily used. But again, it's up to those dealers and what avenues and what resources are out there that are reasonably cost, have reasonable costs, or free of charge. What can you find out there, even on the YouTubes and the other channels that could be a benefit, or on LinkedIn, that you can watch as a group and disseminate and build something off of?
It's interesting. There's no shortage of tools, and there's no shortage of content, and it's really, as you say, finding stuff that's going to help move your thought processes along the way. I completely agree. I think there is going to be this incredible pent-up demand to have human contact, to have interaction. You think about how utterly devastated the travel industry is, and I don't know about you, I cannot wait to get on an airplane. I cannot wait to go somewhere. And I had to get service done on a tire that was misbehaving, and you do drop the car off, leave the fob in it, come back and pick it up after, so there's no direct human interaction. When I got the call from the dealership saying, hey, it's ready to pick up, they said, hopefully next time when we do your seasonal changeover, we'll be able to do it across the counter. I think people are so hungry for the interaction that we need as social animals, and it's going to be interesting to see how we address that bottleneck, because it's going to be a bottleneck both in terms of, I think, consumers wanting to re-engage, but also as service providers wanting to very actively re-engage too.
Oh, I agree. It's interesting. I was supposed to be in Halifax this past weekend, and I got a call from the Bicycle Thief, this killer restaurant there, and I had reservations, and they just called to say, hey, we wanted to call people. I think you already know that everything's closed, but we're just calling our reservations. Because I'd forgot to cancel it, of course, because no one's going anywhere. But man, that totally bummed me out, because it's like, I want to go out and eat. I've been supporting local restaurants here in Riverdale with takeout and things like that. But you're right. I think we're going to find that interesting mix of people that can't wait to just interact with people face to face. There are still going to be people that are going to be fearful of leaving their homes, and I get it. We've got a really crazy, hideous pandemic on our hands, and we really shouldn't take it lightly, or and really respect the social distancing measures. However, though, man, like, the minute this goes down, I know just the streets will be full and businesses will be full. But I also think it's going to be, just as much as there's a bottleneck now with the different things that provinces and states are experiencing with frontline workers, everyone from emergency wards to grocery stores to essential business, they're busy and they're packed all the time. And so once that opens, like that bottleneck I speak of will be really prevalent. So I think, like I said, going back to how can you leverage online training, I think it's important. But I think also too is one of the things that online training has been around lots of people have been offering online training for years and years. It's not sort of new because this is happening. It's been around. Like there's lots of automotive trainers that have that mix of online and offline. Like you could go to something like like Alan Ram's stuff that he used to do, or I know Cardone has lots of stuff that's all online, and Caphart and other people. But even like my friends Joe Webb and Bill Play for a Dealer knows they do in-store, but they do online as well. What I find interesting about what they do is they also have Task Teacher, which is something that comes back after the training while they're doing their online work, in sort of measuring their adoption of what they've learned, adoption of what their training is. So I think I would say for anyone who's engaging trainers out there is find those ways with those platforms to get a sense of, if you are asking your staff to do that and people are wanting to learn and grow while they're home, also find a way of getting a sense of what's the accountability level, or the retention level of what's being learned. It's like in marketing, people have to get their Google certifications all the time, and when you do that, you have to go through a series of tests and quizzes and lessons to get that. And if you pass it at certain grades, then you get your certification. With a lot of automotive training, it's just you just have to participate. You have to sit in the room and put an ass in a seat. If you're going a step further and then looking at the class after the training, like a task teacher does, I think that's also very important when you're looking at things and trainers. How are they helping you ensure that the time and money you're spending, if you are spending money to get it, how is that benefiting you afterwards? Because as we know too, with the level of sales not happening, dealers are really going to also naturally be watching their pennies, because they have to regenerate all this revenue when things do again get back to normal. So again, it's any penny spent, I think moving forward, is going to be really more critically looked at for the benefit of the spend.
That's a really good point, and I think it through this time period, if you are asking your teams to engage and to learn or to acquire some new skills remotely, it actually makes the measurement of the adoption of those skills that much more challenging, because one, it's being done remotely, and two, in the short term, they don't actually have the ability to apply what they're learning into their roles, because those roles are to a large extent suspended.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I guess that's why I went back to, how can you take a new chapter of planning with your team? Because it's one thing to have we know we have weekly sales meetings, weekly team meetings with your service advisors. We meet as groups at the dealerships, and it's just to do sort of the usual, right? Like, what are the numbers? Where are we at? What are we trying for? What are we trying to achieve? But how, and ideas float around there, but are we actually taking more of a step? And I guess what I meant by what I answered earlier with the training is, how can you take more of a, I don't know, an agency approach? And not every agency is the same and approaches things the same way, but how can you take a department at your dealership and work through a thorough strategy build that's not just about throwing ideas up against a wall, walking out of the room and hoping that someone takes it on and makes it happen? It's like, how can you engage a group, take them through a proper strategy build, assign roles and responsibilities, do the proper ideation to make something actually happen? I think that's where a lot of disconnects happen, especially in the dealership world. Is there's lots of great ideas out there, but the actual execution of it, the build of it, the thinking around it, and the execution kind of get lost, because we either rely on a third-party vendor that right now we may not be able to rely on, or we just rely on management or maybe the marketing arm to figure it out. I think this is a way that you could actually give a bit more ownership and more thought leadership to maybe people that in the dealership in different departments that have different experiences that could be very beneficial as we move into the new way of doing business after this.
Yeah, and as you touched on, there's a big chunk of people who have been laid off, who are sitting at home with a fair bit of pent-up energy, and figuring out how to best leverage that energy in letting people champion some new tasks, new directions, new initiatives can be a really nice fit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's people have downtime. People have time where they're if they're not actively working, they're probably at home, they're making sure their kids are doing what online lessons they need to do. But there's a lot of free time to think and mull while you're out walking the dog for the sixth time that day, or doing just sort of those different things. Like there's lots of downtime, and I either, personally, I keep a notebook near me, or or I keep my phone ready, just with voice memos to different ideas and different things that I write, because I find with this time, there's just so much, active time that you can use to maybe be of benefit to your store, like when things come back, and not just, and again, I think you'll have people that work at your dealership that want to do that, that want to get into those situations and think about how we can make things better when everyone's back. Some people will just be waiting to come back, right? They'll be your clock punchers, but you will have a lot of team that really may have a lot to offer and create tasks or challenges for the team to come up with, and maybe meet once a week and get on Zoom and have a beer, or whatever it is, like do it over a cocktail hour, or however you want to do it. But you can make it fun. It doesn't have to be a laborious ask. It can be light, and it can be entertaining, but maybe things will come out of it, just because a lot of us just have tons of time on our hands.
Yeah. So let's talk just briefly about the new normal. Let's hold your thoughts on the new normal up against some of the gems that you may have scribbled into your notebook. Give me a couple of examples of things that you'd like to see part of this new normal. You've been an observer and a participant in this industry for a long time. There are some things that have been slow to change, some things not so much. But what are just a couple of ideas that you would love to see as dealerships are sort of creating that, look, let's build some strategy in this time period, throw a few goalposts into the grass that they may want to aim at?
What would I like to see? It's in a way, it's with something that happened this major, and I know that everyone really talks about it, but I actually mull, like, I wonder how much will just go back to the way it was the minute the doors go back open. Like, we've all, it's been 2 or 3 months of 4 months of, some really serious shit that's gone down. And then we've all looked at how this new normal is going to be. But I wonder out loud, like the minute the doors open up again and the minute everything gets back to normal, how much of it will just go back to the way it was, because this is an industry that it very easily falls back into old habits based on character defects of the industry, character defects of management, and part of that is powered by ego. So what I'd like to see coming out of it is that with everything that you do, and with it, like I guess with everything, events like this just show you how fast everything can be taken away, whether it's economically based or it's health based. This is something that can just remove things very, very quickly. So is it enough that coming out of this for dealerships and their teams to be more accountable? And I guess in the broadest sense of the term is, how can we just remove ourselves and start to distance ourselves from, if this is a new normal, can we walk away from old habits? And it's something I've done in other talks, where I do one thing different today. I talk about this professional inventory. And so I'd really like to see dealerships make a shit list of, like, here's all the stuff we suck at, and all the stuff that we're not really good at, and historically we have not been good at. Maybe it's like we don't adopt process the way we should. We don't focus on the customer experience as best we can. We sometimes say that we're doing everything right when we know that we're not 100% on board with what we say we're doing publicly. So I would love to see dealers take this time too, to do some reflection on an honest assessment of what they can truly make better, not just right now figure out how to sell cars online, but go, as an organization, here's the stuff coming out of this. Now that we've had this quiet time to really look at ourselves, what do we stink at? And that's a big step for anybody, especially a business owner with a lot of pride and a lot of ego, because you have to get past the fear of going through it. So number one for me is I just love to see dealers be really honest with how can we build, Clint, my pal Clint always says, Clint Burns says, like, in good times, bad habits are formed, and in bad times, good habits are formed. So that's a page of take this time to reset and build good habits, not just focus on how to shove someone else into a car. I think the other thing too is coming out, and I know we talked about it offline a little bit about events. I would like to see more dealers actually hit events, and it's twofold. I'd like to see events, and I'd like to see dealers engage in events properly in a way that the spirit of it is truly educational, and not just I'm going to get away from the office, or the vendor's just going to try to sell things. In disguising, what did I say? A thinly veiled pitch disguised as an educational opportunity. I want to see the industry as a whole at these shows really dive in and help both sides come away from the events with beneficial relationships and solid lines of communication, rather than the adversarial tone of it. But also I want to see a lot of the shows just get away from hanging their hats on, well, we have the most innovative show. I think part of that is, so what? Like if people aren't leaving these shows and walking away with game plans and thinking that they can apply to their business, all the keynotes in the world are great, but when something like this happens, and again, it's just from a phone call from a couple weeks ago with a friend of mine, a dealer, saying it's lonely at the top because I'm all by myself and I have to figure this out right now. I don't have my managers, I don't have my teams. I think the events moving forward after all of this settles down, I think on both sides there really needs to be more of a collaborative effort to be helpful rather than revenue driven.
I think those are great thoughts, and I think we've given dealers a couple of areas of homework that they can take away. I really appreciate it. I also want to echo, for those who haven't been, I want to echo your recommendation, the Bicycle Thief. It is a great restaurant, and when
it's amazing.
Anyone who's in Halifax and is looking for a great meal down by the waterfront, it's an awesome place to go.
Yeah, and if they're doing takeout, help them out. Right?
Yeah, for sure, and same for the restaurants in your neighborhood. I know there's up in Aurora, there's a curry place that we're doing everything we can to single-handedly keep them in business.
Yeah, so, go do the takeout thing, because I know, walking into a couple of places to pick up, or they're doing curbside and they're coming out to the door with your food. Like I've had more than one of those owners come out, and they're the only ones inside, taking the orders in, doing the cooking, getting it out the door, and they're appreciative of it. So, wherever I have friends that have other businesses that can do online deliveries and things like that, like, sniff those out. But the other thing too is, if I could put it out, is I know while we're figuring out how to generate revenue for our people and our and get people back to work, just be very conscious of the things like the food banks in your area and things like that could also need help, because those, I know we're appreciating all our frontline workers, but let's make sure that our food bank folks are supported as well, just with donations as much as possible.
Great thoughts. Brent, I really appreciate the time. I think it'll be probably the first of a few conversations we have, but thank you very much. This is Neil Hiscox signing off for now for Canadian Auto Dealer.